I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the postseason basketball podcast. I'm Ben Detrick. With me, as usual. Oh, Jordan's on vacation. Okay.
Usually
So
there's 3 people here.
Jordan's on vacation, enjoying the black sands of the Caribbean. But Andrew Kuo is here.
That's right, grinding. Summer league.
Rise and grind, dude.
Grind up. I went to Coney Island last weekend, and there's a Brooklyn Nets outpost there where you can buy D'Angelo Russell shirts still.
Is it on sale?
Nope. They had baby sizes, though.
So people are paying full price for vintage.
The NBA moves fast, man. Maybe word hadn't gotten to Coney Island yet via pigeon. What do you call those? Those pigeon messengers.
Messenger pigeons?
I just workshopped that. It was pretty cool.
Shout out to former Cookies guest, your old Droog, Coney Island's finest, who is maybe now learning the news, the tidings that Kyrie Irving has signed with his beloved Brooklyn Nets, and D'Angelo Russell is off to the other side of our blessed nation.
Yeah. Well, back to the grind up thing. It was next to a shirt that said grind up. And I was like, what team in the NBA doesn't adopt that phrase? Is it uniquely Brooklyn? It was right next to a big Biggie Smalls mural.
Yeah, that's a tough one because can you also use culture? Because every other team uses culture. It's either culture or grind. Mm-hmm. Grind from the bottom just to make it to the bottom, or culture.
Yeah. Are the Knicks kind of angry that they took the Oakley 90s vibe away from them? Like, oh, we're Brooklyn. We're grimier than you big wigs in Manhattan. Like, the Lakers can't say grind up.
No, we've talked about this before, that literally every other team's espouses a working class identity, except for the Lakers. Everybody else is like, yeah, we're just like blue collar vibes, man. You know, get in the trenches, Joe Six-Pack, Joe Lunch Pail, Joe Slop Bucket. And the Lakers are like, showtime, baby.
What about Miami, though? The Heat kind of have that going on. Well, it's the Pat Riley effect, maybe.
Yeah, they do their culture, though. But, yeah, their culture is also like
That's
ball
awesome.
out.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jimmy Butler retiring in Miami.
It looks beautiful there, man.
I don't blame him. In the words of Jadakiss, gangsters get fat and move to Miami.
Oh, you're veering on Boomer, Apex Boomer over here. To quote Jadakiss.
Jadakiss is upper echelon, apex, alpha boomer. Like if every time, you know, someone who hears like, we gonna make it, and like a tear comes down their cheek. I remember being at the Bad Boy reunion show at Barclays Center. Boomer Central.
Amazing. I wanted to go.
It was fucking great.
Yeah.
It was magnificent. And I had some press tickets, and they were really good. I hadn't asked for anything other than tickets, and they gave great ones. So we were really close, and it was like French Montana and Diddy.
Amazing.
But it was like Mary J. Blige and 112, and it was really mostly an R&B concert.
Ends up being more emotional than anyone thinks, right?
It was wonderful. It was so much nostalgia, but also the fact that it was singing versus just a rap show. There were emotive moments. But the best thing was the crowd, because it was in Brooklyn, it was at Barclays, and it was largely people who were from Brooklyn. And because I think they did the same show at the Garden. I could be wrong. So this was like a Brooklyn-centric show. And it was on, I want to say, Biggie's birthday. So there was this whole connection to it. And it was like people brought out like their Pellies.
Yes.
It was
Eight
like
ball.
everyone was like 35 to 45 and like very into it. The Locks got a standing ovation when they
Was
came
Shine
out.
there?
he was piped in via video. But the locks came out on like those risers, on 3 separate risers.
Amazing.
And people were just like chanting, and like a guy who was clearly just like fresh out was like rapping Wild Out verbatim, just like screaming the lyrics. It was really fun. It was one of the more enjoyable concerts I have been to in a really long time. Also, it was like 2 years ago, so this isn't even like a recent thing. But if you do have an opportunity to go to the canceled Bad Boy reunion concert series, absolutely take that opportunity.
What's more boomer, a Bad Boy fan or a Diplomats fan?
It's tough. We're getting up there where Dipset has replaced Boot Camp like in the original Gun Clappers.
But I asked that because Bad Boy fans, like, they had hits, right? They had like blockbuster MTV videos, like Hype Williams, like they kind of like permeated popular culture. Diplomats never had that, so like it breeds two different kinds of fans, right? It's like, just to generalize, I feel like Bad Boy fans would just be like people looking for like hits that reminded them of their youth. Diplomats fans might be like, this is the real shit still.
I feel like both of these groups are not quite full boomer, only because there was a sense of humor and fun and kind of a anti...
Nas feeling.
Yeah, there was a sentiment to both of those movements that was thumbing an eye at tradition, and it was about money and parties, and
Pink furs.
it wasn't self-righteous.
That's
Bad
true.
Boy was reviled by rap purists.
Oh my God,
And
yeah.
I mean, Bad Boy was seen as ruining rap,
Yeah.
despite the fact that everyone loved Biggie.
Puff was Public Enemy #1.
Yeah, he was the villain for the rap purist of that era. And Dipset with Cameron kind of was the same thing.
Cameron was so good.
But people,
So
purists didn't like him.
Yes.
Purists like, oh, he doesn't talk about shit. It's like blah, blah, blah. It's all meaningless. It glamorizes negative things. So both those groups were at least anti-boomers of their moment.
Yeah. I remember when the first Cameron record came out, I was interning at...
Confessions of Fire?
Yeah. I was interning at some company, and the guy was like, yo, this is the new record. This guy's the new dude. And I was like, cool, let's see the cover art. And it was him, like, glistening, shirtless, with, like, in front of a bunch of fire, holding some sort of, like, welding tool. And I was like, this can't be the guy. And then I listened to it, and I was like, oh, this guy's incredible. Who's the art director here who blew this, you know?
Yeah, it was a bizarre, very homoerotic cover. He was oiled up and kind of like one of the steel workers from The Simpsons.
Yeah.
We work hard and we play hard. And he had the hammer.
What boomer decided to like frame him as this like lunch pail guy?
It was like I feel like he might have had an anvil. Like there was
Yeah.
maybe some tongs, a barbecue grill in front of him.
Yeah. Kiss the chef.
He definitely had like a Carhartt apron.
Yeah. Grill master vibes for sure.
But then he had, lyrics like "throw your baby against the wall," like bash its brains out. But he's there in this
Weird.
like,
Yeah. So weird. But instantly, like, right, and like we're gonna get to this later, but it feels like his career. I want Russ to have his career because we found out how good he was. Like the label stuck to him, they gave him money, and they let him do whatever kind of it felt like he wanted to do. We found out how good Cameron was, which was probably one of the best, funniest rappers of all time. By the time Purple Haze came out, right? Like, this guy's amazing. He brought like J.R. Ryder to relevance just by him being so good.
and in the way that
Best rap name ever.
there's that old phrase from like Chinatown where, and I'm gonna bungle it.
Easy.
I mean,
Alliance.
you're in the alliance, I know. But it's something like politicians, buildings, and prostitutes stick around long enough, they become respectable.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that with rap, that even some people that were disdained as like modernists and being anti-establishment stick around long enough, they just become nostalgic heroes. Like Cameron is a perfect example of that, along with Dipset. Like purists really dislike them, and now it's like, I remember those skilled wordsmiths such as Ruger Rell and you know,
J.R. Writer.
I mean, those guys were good, but now they're viewed as like elder statesmen of, you know, poets. The urban griots.
Well, we got into this kind of with our gentrification thing, like this year, when the movie theater on Houston and Eldridge closed down. People like, and it's going to turn into like offices. People like, oh, the old neighborhood's changing. Now we're just going to get another glass office. I was like, motherfuckers, like you guys hated that movie theater going up, being like, there goes the neighborhood. There's going to be a fancy movie theater here. But it's just like time. Time goes by and people like remember their youth differently. Youths, Joe Pesci, Bagel Boy.
We'll get there. We'll get there. But I feel like there was an interesting tweet from Will Stalley, who's editor at the New York Times Magazine, who had basically said that the schism among millennials was Cameron and Kanye. That Cameron didn't care about shit, was funny, and Kanye, on the other hand, was like aggrieved, wounded, a try-hard. And I'm like,
I love both those guys so much.
I like both of them too.
Yeah.
And their songs together were magnificent. But it is a funny, like, sort of I don't know, way to differentiate between two personality types of a generation.
So different. So different. Kanye's changed so much, and Cameron has not changed at all, which is amazing, right? Like, you hear about these Dipset, you're like, we're back. I'm like, oh, it's good old Cameron. But when Kanye comes back, you're like, oh, what's he going to be talking about now? Like, what's he into? Who are his friend circle these days? You know, like, it all changes. And it's kind of interesting as, like, enigmas.
Like, it doesn't work in the basketball context because there's a physical component to it where you wear down over age. It's always surprising, though, that especially, like, we can talk about rap, we can talk about music, whatever, but someone will come out in their early 20s and, like Cameron, and be funny and witty and just this incredible talent. And now, like, is he worse? Is he the same? Are we just sick of him? I mean, is that something that happens in the art world as well? Where
100%. It happens in the indie rock world. I mean, I think last time we were sitting here and I was talking about Built to Spill. They still make good songs, but people are just tired of them. So if they just changed up their whole look, changed the name of the band, being like, oh, there's this new band that's great. And I think that's a problem. Oh, man, that second album, that second movie, like, it's so hard after people like, you're great. And then you make Us, that movie, which is still good, but the buzz is different. You're like, oh, were we tired of him? Were we tired of talking about this new director? Did we make it too hard for him? Do we expect these artists to be the totality of our, like, desires put onto them? Like, you need to be funny, culturally relevant, new, modern, but also a foot into tradition. You know, like, we want all these things to click, and when they don't click all at once, like, we move on so quickly. I kind of think about that with Game of Thrones. Like, we were anticipating the ending of that show with bated breath, and then when it happens, we're like, oh, this is not what we want anymore, and we kind of, like, trickled away, and it kind of went out with a whimper.
every now and then someone will be like, oh, did you know, like, you know, Ghostface has new music out? And you're like,
Yeah.
He does? Yeah. Like, he's been making music this whole time? And he is. It's there on Spotify. You're like, oh, he's been putting out albums, and these guys like Raekwon, and it's so weird to think of how different it is when that would have been a world-changing event when you were like a kid, and you're like, yeah, he just just rapping into the void. One of the more beloved. It's not even that. I don't know if he's good or bad. We're just like, I'm just not hearing what you're putting out right now, and I'm deeply uninterested in it for no specific reason.
It's funny, we talked about this last week, and I went home and I kind of felt bad about it because I didn't say it the right way. But like when we were talking to a Lakers fan, and they were like, Lakers, and we were like, oh, we're talking about like salary cap. Now we have to readjust and like share this joy with this person who just wants to be like, are we gonna get Kawhi Leonard? I'm like, I want to share this with you, but I have to readjust instead of thinking about like cap and who's left available on the free agent list. I would just want to laugh and like hug you and have a good time. And I feel this way about music and movies and anything because like there's always like a breaking off of subcultures when this happens. Like there's certain people's jobs to be like, yo, Nelly Furtado like put out many good records, but we just remember her for one. You know, like obviously everyone pays attention to the Beyoncés or the most famous people, but then when people keep making work like Timberland, like his best known stuff was in a time period, but he kept on making good records. And, we're lucky enough to know people whose job it is to like follow this. But now with like I really enjoy people. I really enjoyed this podcast I heard this week that our friend John Caramonica did about Hootie and the Blowfish. And it was just like, talk about something that transformed through time.
And one of the real interesting takeaways from that particular podcast, and most people don't know this, is that Rucker Park was actually named after Darius Rucker of Hootie and the Blowfish.
That's right.
Most people don't know that.
Right. Service to the community.
Blacktop playground legend Darius Rucker.
Yeah. But I guess what I mean is like it coincides with the NBA stuff where people are like, CP3, I thought he retired. I'm like, he's very relevant and very good. But right, he's no longer like the in the eye of a casual fan.
There's also an argument across genres that overanalysis can take the joy out of something. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that theory because I feel like if you weren't deriving pleasure from overanalysis itself, then you'd stop doing that. Or maybe it's like once you've peeked behind the curtain, you can no longer
Red pill.
Yeah, you can no longer watch the show without thinking of the machinery behind it and the puppet controlling, QAnon.
This is inevitable with everything, right? Like if there's something you like, even casual, like if you like a slice from a pizza shop that you go to for the first time. I mean, I have a weird personality type where I'm like, I'm going to go there every day for 2 weeks and then figure out what's happening there. Like, why is it my favorite? What options do they have? What are they good at? What are they bad at? And like inherently that ruins the pizza for me. And I know my personality type, but it's important. Like as you get older, I find myself just being like, oh, just enjoy this moment because it's going to be ruined after this because I'm going to ask them what else they have, or compare it to something else.
I mentioned that a bit when talking about nightlife before, is that without getting into that whole spiel, it was that the joy of getting into a party is lost when you're supposed to be there for work.
Yeah, dude.
When there's a big crowd of people there and you're like, oh man, can I navigate this throng and like slip inside this party and it's going to be sick. And someone's like, all right, there's Detrick, go get him security because we got to get him inside. And you're like, oh, right, I'm here to serve a purpose for your PR staff, for your, for your venue. It has nothing to do with me getting inside on any merits other than I'm working right now.
Yeah.
Or if I'm not working this event, I will work another event, and you want to have me in like good standing with whoever is running this party.
And we seem like, I definitely agree, and we seem like douchebags talking about this in New York because access is amazing, and to have it is a blessing. And I felt like that when I was doing music writing for a newspaper, and I would just be able to get into shows. And it kind of changed a little bit. I still enjoyed it quite a bit, but I kind of think that way in terms of like, by accident, by being super fans of basketball, there's times where someone's like, oh, do you want to meet this baller at this party? Like, you're a fan. Do you want to meet Chris Webber? And I'm like, I'd rather not. Like, I love Chris Webber. Like, he's one of my idols. But I just don't want to meet him. I don't want this to change or transform. I want to, like, keep this fun.
Yeah, I mean, there was an NBA player at a restaurant we were at, and we saw him there on consecutive Fridays.
Loves the delicious French food.
And there was no feeling at all about maybe I should go over and say hello, or it's like, man, that shit is church and state.
Yes, exactly. And
it's work versus something else. Whatever it is, this is whatever cookies is supposed to be.
Or you're taking the
different.
blue pill. You're just like, I choose to keep this experience the same. I want to enjoy the thing. I don't want to look behind the curtain.
Yeah. I think as you said, we've both ruined enough things by wanting to know the internal mechanics of it, that having some things that are sacred and not profane are kind of cool.
Yeah. And that's the challenge of like being a super hyper fan of anything, right? And that's why I love people who just like know about one thing. It's like I just am really into jazz records. I'm like, yo, tell me about everything, or like I'm just really into this one kind of cooking. I'm like, yo, can I hang out with you for an afternoon and follow you around? Like I just like really gravitate towards people like that, and I gravitate towards NBA fans like that, kind of.
Finding out that someone has a weird interest that you don't know shit about is kind of one of the best things in life.
Yeah, I
Like,
love it.
wait, you're into taxidermy? Like, just go off, king.
Yeah.
Or queen. Like, I want to hear about your bizarre hobby that I know nothing about. And that way, at a later date, I can regurgitate some of this information and pretend like I know about it.
Yeah, man. Like good boomers do. That's what the Knicks should do, right?
Give me a slight mantle of expertise that I can then use against someone who knows as little as I know in this moment.
Yeah, the Knicks should be looking at the Spurs and be like, we don't care about threes anymore. I'm like, ooh, geniuses.
But speaking of both hyperactivity and profanity,
Bagel Boss.
your boy, the
He is
Bagel
my
Boss,
boy. He is my boy.
went viral. You guys have probably seen it. I think there's 2 clips of this guy, but then more surfaced later. Maybe
Yeah, he's like a vlogger.
Yeah, and he's a petite man from Long Island.
Pick your words carefully.
I am. I know the company that I keep. And he goes on a lot of tantrums in public places that are mostly about his height and how people treat him because of his height, and whether it's women allegedly telling him he should die because he's short, or people asking him his height, or people kind of laughing just in his general vicinity.
Biting their lips. I seen that.
He loses his mind and flips out, and went viral over this last week for a freak out in a bagel store in Long Island.
I could really relate to this guy. Not the violence part, not the yelling part, but the marginalization he must feel. I mean, I'm short, but I'm not that short. But I'm also Asian, so I've always had this weird experience through the lens of my behind my thick glasses, but like thick lens glasses. But
You're squinting through the reflection of your calculator,
yeah. But
glinting off of your bottle cap glasses.
when I saw the clip, I was like, "This is hilarious," and I feel terrible. Like I'm laughing at the wrong thing. Like he's being like, people laugh at me, and we're like, "Yeah, we are." Like this is hilarious. But there was one clip of him in like a convenience shop or maybe like a gas station shop, and some guy was just like, "How tall are you?" And he just goes off.
I saw that one.
It's like, it's 5 a.m. They asked me how tall I am.
And then he like calls the cops in, and he's
Yeah.
like, "This is harassment," and then they're just kind of sitting there behind the counter staring at this guy like, just wanted to know how your height was.
But that video has tension to it, right? Because these are immigrants. And he has you can almost project this vibe where he's just like, how dare you tell me? How dare you insult me? You know?
Yes, and it's immigrants there, and it's women in the other case.
Yeah. So there's a lot of tension in these things. Very funny on the surface. But then it gets kind of complicated, right? And then some bigger guy assaults him, tackles him, whatever.
Yeah, I was glad the guy didn't, snuff him out. It was just sort of a weird, like, takedown
Restraint.
tackle.
Yeah. But that was a weird move by that guy. I'm like, don't tackle somebody. Just like walk away, man.
Also, and I feel like this has been much discussed. This is not any brain revelation of my own.
Ooh.
But the idea that are we laughing at obvious mental illness here? And the answer is almost surely yes.
It's so hard, right? Because it's
If
such
it's
a
not
broad
straight
spectrum.
mental illness, we are laughing at, I don't know, anxiety, self-loathing, all these emotions that he clearly has that are bubbling up, and his inability to keep them constrained in a normal sense. We are definitely mocking him for that, but that's the whole basis of like the public freakout. It's that there isn't context, and if you lose your shit in front of a camera and it goes viral, that's kind of the deal as well.
And this is not to get too out there, but it's interesting, right? Because he's mad at a phenomenon on the internet. I know these websites, all this data from these websites have come out, and like short people don't do well, like Asian men don't do well. And I'm sure he does get harassment on this online thing, which is kind of like just a traditional viral thing that people do, being like, you're too short. But in real life, people act different. And then he acts out in real life, but then gets documented and put back onto the internet where the thing kind of feeds again. Like, it's like throwing chum into the water, twice.
Looking at the sort of public spaz and like the woman in the Apple store.
Yeah.
Apple Care told me or whatever. Like, I don't know who she is. Most people don't. But she might be a completely normal person who had a moment of freak out. Bad day.
Yeah.
And she yelled at someone, but it was on video. And then she became the incarnation of like privileged white woman losing their shit and asking to speak with the management.
Yeah.
And you became an archetype.
Yeah.
Again, maybe she had like a bad hair day. Maybe she got a parking ticket and she went in there and she's like, well, motherfucker, I just need to talk I talked to someone on the phone. Like, we've all done that. We've talked to people on the phone and gotten furious. Like, imagine if what you said to not even real humans on the phone when you're trying to press buttons or talking with the amount of cursing and freakouts that you do when it's like Con Ed and you're like, pay my bill. Pay my bill, you fuck.
Yeah.
And those are all being recorded.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting. That's my resting place now in New York. Like, we've been here for so long, and like, you get random like aggressions put on you that could like ruin your day. And I always bounce back to the place in my brain was like, someone's having a bad day. I don't matter to them. They don't know me. They just saw me a second ago. So if they're yelling at me for like standing in the wrong place online, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. You're having a bad day, And the bagel guy is interesting because I always think of personnel with these things because it's a phenomenon like we're talking about, like this overarching thing, but also he's very funny. What does he say? He's like, "You're not my boss. You're not my father. You're not my boss,
and you're not God." Or,
you're not God. You're not my father, and you're not my boss. And I'm like,
some holy trilogy of
this guy's got bars,
authority
man.
figures.
Yeah, this guy's a rapper for sure.
Straight bars.
Yeah, man. Just get him to a cipher and like get the camera on him, man.
I mean, him, Tyler Johnson, Dame Lillard.
Is he taller than Buckshot? Buckshot was like 5'1".
Buckshot Shorty?
Yeah. Did he dropped the Shorty, right?
Yeah, then I think Buckshot Shorty is my father's name. Call me the 5-foot accelerator.
I once rode an elevator with Prodigy, and I was surprised to find out that I was somehow taller than him.
I think I saw him at a Dwayne Reed buying medication one time.
God, he's such a lovable guy, man.
Rest in peace, Prodigy. What a legend.
His late talk about late stuff that like some people really love, but people are like, oh, those first few Mobb Deep records. I'm like, ooh, his solo stuff is really good.
HNIC was fantastic. Yeah. He was an incredibly good rapper then. But even when he came back out of prison and like Return of the Mac,
oh yeah, I forgot he went to prison.
He didn't have that same energy to his voice. It was very sort of snarling and I don't know, just it was a sense of it was more plotting.
It had some bagel guy in it.
It was a bagel boss.
Yeah.
But those were good albums too, though. Very, very listenable because of cool production from Alchemist. What is this boomer-ass conversation?
I know, we gotta get
all right. Speaking of boomers and Boomtown, how about that for a segue?
One of your best ones.
OKC.
OKC.
Huge news in the basketball world. The Oklahoma City Thunder, as we've known them for the last decade, have finally closed the chapter. Uh-huh. In a move that we saw coming and was assumed to occur following the departure of Paul George off to L.A., where he's going to join Kawhi Leonard for 2 years before they go to the Knicks.
Before they destroy the Clippers franchise.
And head to the Knicks
with
Giannis to form a super team.
It's all going according to plan. Shout out to Dolan.
So Westbrook traded to the Rockets for Chris Paul and a bevy of draft picks.
2 draft picks, right?
And 2 swaps, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Instant reaction is how do we like James Harden being reunited with his former Thunder running mate, Russell Westbrook?
Exciting, man. Maybe a downgrade because Chris Paul is still such a good player, but I love it because what's the worst case scenario for Daryl Morey and the Rockets? Everything goes according to plan. Harden plays like his MVP self, and Chris Paul like pulls a hammy. And it's like, what are you doing? You didn't account for this probability, which is we've seen before. He got rid of that, so he changed the narrative of that. Westbrook is 3 years younger, gets hurt sometimes, but like you get rid of the risk, the optics of a Chris Paul injury. Exciting. Mike D'Antoni, space and pace. I think, like we talked about last week, Russell Westbrook is underrated now. Like, all you have to do is, like, stop taking 7 threes. Maybe take a couple. Just drive to the hoop and dish.
To me, there's a couple things I'm worried about and a couple things I'm not worried about. I'm not that worried about the idea of there aren't enough basketballs to go around.
Only boomers say that.
That's boomer shit. Yeah. I'm not worried about it. Basketball players can play together. These guys were literally teammates and with Kevin Durant. I know minutes adjusted, but like you can figure this out. Maybe it won't work, but to me that's just not something that I'm that concerned about. I think having 2 guys who are, I want to say, first and second in the league in assists is a unique sort of exponential skill set. That having 2 wonderful passers and guys who are very difficult to guard one-on-one is a unique weapon and awesome. And my only concern, though, is that Westbrook can't shoot, and you don't want him taking threes. So that's my only concern, is that if Harden has the ball, and when he is obviously one of the best who's ever played at one-on-one, just murdering his guy off the dribble, scoring, getting to the line, kicking the ball out, etc., I don't really know where Russ goes in that situation.
We'll find out, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like something that's like it won't work. It's a legit concern. It's more legit to me than being worried about if they can coexist or share the ball. It's kind of like, where does Russ go?
It's true. I have all the faith in D'Antoni and Morey to figure this out. And to backtrack a little bit, like the narrative of the story of Russ being creating a situation where players can't play around him is like total bullshit, right? Because like Paul George had an MVP run with him. Kevin Durant was an MVP with him. Like, he probably makes players better. We're just thinking of Oladipo, who maybe was having a bad year. Maybe he didn't feel well.
He was having a bad day.
He had the poops.
But here's the thing. If Paul George was healthy, I think they probably let's say 7 out of 10 times beat Portland in that series. They had to deal with Dame Lillard shooting like a maniac.
Amazing
taking
shot.
Really smart 46-foot step backs. Lillard never resorted to that despite his, struggles against Golden State. Never went to that trademark 46-foot step back. That's a good shot. But with a healthy Paul George and Lillard playing normally, I think OKC generally wins that series against a Blazers team without Nurkic. If they won that series, maybe they beat Denver. Then maybe they beat an injured Golden State team without Kevin Durant, and all of a sudden they're in the finals. I'm just saying that team with Westbrook and Paul George was a solid, good squad.
I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of the take-a-tude that's happening on Twitter about this trade is like, oh, Lillard murdered this team. He ended that franchise. And I'm like, no, he didn't. But I'm a nihilist. So I'm just like, or maybe I'm just like a coin flip guy. I'm like, it could have gone either way. And right, in a heartbeat, we could have seen Russ in the finals again.
But also, we're not to rehash what we discussed with OKC last week, is that I ultimately think this was a convenient a convenient blow up that corresponded with them being confronted by monstrous luxury taxes. That it was very excusable to say, this has run its course. Let's rebuild, let's restock. You got two elite players, and you're like, we're going to blow this up. It's a little sus, especially with the disintegration of the Warriors and the dispersal of talent around the league. You could have argued that OKC was in position to kind of make a run.
Yeah, they look good.
But they're like, actually, though, we don't want to pay $70 million or whatever it was in luxury tax. Even moving Jeremy Grant last week.
That's sad.
But that saved them something like $30 million.
Yeah, so much on the cap. Yeah.
These things, to me, ran together. This natural rebuild with wanting to save literally $100 million or whatever.
Absolutely. And I think it's ironic that CP3 and Russ were traded for each other because their contracts are kind of getting phased out. Those mega John Wall contracts. Now we're seeing all these stars kind of looking at the horizon and be like, let's reboot in 2 years, or 3. Whatever the trend is, it's going away from these contracts that these very smart GMs gave these excellent players. It's a shame. I feel really bad for Chris Paul. But the point guard, he's so good, and now he's probably looking at a situation where he's like, how come no one wants to play with me? I'm going to maybe have to finagle my way to play with Jimmy Butler. That's not how he saw his career ending.
I agree, and especially after signing a long-term deal with Houston, you're going to play with Harden, you're going to be a contender. You guys are the only team who really seem to have figured out a way to attack Golden State on their own terrain, more or less. Obviously Golden State.
Oh, they were my favorites to win it all every year for the last 3 years.
Golden State's had their titles vacated. They are 1 and 2 in the finals.
You're saying
but Houston,
Ben Simmons 1 title, Kevin Durant 0 titles?
It's remarkable, but that it shook
numbers,
out like
baby.
that. It's just math.
Yeah.
But Houston with Westbrook, to me, is perhaps evidence that Daryl Morey is of the mindset that we are post-shooting. We've been pushing this idea of post-shooting basketball for a little while.
For a long time.
And this is a post-shooting move where you say, we can put shooting almost everywhere. Therefore, we can have players who excel at other aspects of the game and are not good shooters, and it's chill. The same way the Bucks did it with Giannis, Ben Simmons with the Sixers, and Draymond Green. And now we're seeing a guy who cannot shoot going to a team who has been the foremost advocate of three-pointers. There is something to this.
Yeah, D'Antoni invented this whole thing in Phoenix. 7 seconds or less, the value of a corner three, all this stuff. And thank you, Morey. Every year he does something funny and unique. And I definitely believe the smart GMs like Daryl Morey are in a post-shooting era. And Russell Westbrook is a top-tier version of that, right? I mean, you mentioned Giannis. He's there too, Ben Simmons. Russell Westbrook isn't in the basketball genius category, but he is a devastating transition player.
He does also give you basketball genius production in terms of distribution.
Yeah.
He leads the NBA in assists, and he also led it by a mile in potential assists.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I think, I'm just totally speculative here, that Morey saw, was that it's not just assists, it's the potential ones, in which OKC couldn't shoot. They had a lot of guys in that team who were complete bricklayers. And if you say, Westbrook, if you were passing those, if you're delivering those passes to guys who can shoot, all of a sudden you're creating a lot more points.
Absolutely. And it leaves to be seen what else Morey has in store. But we're looking at Tucker, Gordon, Capella, CP3, and Harden. I'll take it.
I mean, I love the fact that he does things that are seemingly counterintuitive to conventional wisdom. People are like, what? You're giving all this money to Chris Paul? You can never move him. Cool, we just moved him.
Yeah.
Who would I move him for? The former MVP. You can't trade first-round picks. He's like, I'll trade a whole bunch.
That's what I love about this NBA, where it's just like, what are we going to do in Minnesota? A new guy comes in, he's like, we got to get rid of Wiggins. And they're like, oh, yeah, we do. It's like, you guys shouldn't have signed him, but let's try to get rid of him. The minute that the Wolves tricked the Knicks into taking Wiggins, the world's open for them. It's just like these obvious things where Morey's probably looking at it being like, yeah, what if we got Russell Westbrook? We'll just trade CP3 for him.
That's why I believe you should be judicious with giving out, insanely huge contracts. And sometimes you get unlucky. John Wall would have been a guy that you could always have traded despite this massive contract, the same way that Blake Griffin is someone that you can always move. Eventually, someone will bite the bullet and be like, we need a star. He's a star. He makes a lot of money, but we can't get another guy who qualifies at that stature, and we want one of them. So we'll take Griffin. Yeah. But Wall just blew up his leg, and you can't account for that. But as we're seeing, Chris Paul, people crowed about this being an immovable contract. Literally 3 days later, moved for a guy who was an MVP 3 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. Who people thought was an immovable contract as well. But it brings up a thing. You mentioned John Wall, and I still have nightmares of the Warriors going down. That was very disturbing to me, getting that injured in that way. And I have this issue now where I see all these moves and all these player transactions, and I'm just thinking of injury risk and how these people rank in if you were going to gamble on an injury, it's just Chris Paul is probably going to get injured, right? Just based off of history, age, and usage. And there was an article that came out on ESPN about how, starting with AAU, all these players are playing too much. And it's attributing to a lot of injuries that we haven't seen. We haven't seen this many injuries in a long time. And people are playing summer ball. They're working out a lot. They're playing a lot of minutes, a lot of games, a lot of deep playoff runs. And I'm just terrified of a player like Chris Paul by the time you get to the playoffs.
I want to talk about that article. The only other point I was going to make was that I just looked up the potential assist stats. And last year, Russ had almost 21 potential assists. And second in the league was LeBron James with 16.2. And then the next tier of guys, John Wall, CP3, Ben Simmons, Trae Young, are in the 15s. So
Trae Young?
So we're talking about Westbrook
love it.
having 5 more than basically the elite tier of distributors in the league who had 15. That is a huge...
Houston's going to be super fun.
That is a huge difference.
Especially with an assassin like Harden. This is going to be great.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see that team.
Yeah.
In a way that I really liked when they got Chris Paul, but I wasn't into watching them last year, even though I like what they're doing and I appreciate Daryl Morey and his way of thinking and flouting of the conventions of basketball. But I'm really excited to see Harden and Westbrook because they will get into it sometimes too. Which is,
oh my God, these guys are gonna be so salty. I mean, this league, right?
This league.
This is super fun. Where would you want Westbrook after the LA team stack up? Brooklyn out of the question for 2 years. Philly, championship favorites. Where do you want Russ to go? I'm Harden. Put him on the Rockets.
When there were proposed destinations like Miami or Detroit, I'm they're fine. Detroit's kind of dull, and it just seems
I don't
surly.
care about Detroit.
There's just a surly, sodden negativity to the Pistons. I'm
they're too boomer. They have the lunch pail thing.
It's Drummond and Blake, and not to say they could have had all these guys, but Drummond and Blake and Westbrook, you're just oh man, that's just so sour.
Yeah, that's no fun.
But Houston is a sourness that's tart on tart. It's a Gosa beer.
Ooh. But let's talk about this article, this ESPN article, because I've been ridiculed on cookies before about
never
wanting to put Kristaps Porzingis on ice when he was a Knick before he had that injury. I was just stop playing him. We know he's great. He's still growing. He looks like he might get hurt. Until you surround him with players, just say he has tendonitis and sit him for 20 games. Just put him behind glass and lock the vault,
I hear that. And I think there is certainly an argument to be made that less minutes and less wear and tear for young guys in meaningless seasons could contribute to their health. There is no way that it makes a lot of sense to say Devin Booker we should be playing you 40 minutes down the stretch in meaningless games and
Yeah.
having you chuck up 60 points.
So we can max you out because your counting stats have
There's not really a very good argument that will benefit him later. Like minutes, yes, but playing someone into the ground to like rack up stats, why? But the article did make another point, and that was that these guys are already broken before they even get to the NBA.
Yeah.
That was I think the scary takeaway.
And all these first and second year players were just going down. You have the Michael Porter Juniors, the Mo Bambas, Simmons, Embiid. Like this trend is observable and happening.
The argument that they made, and I'm saying they as a reference to the author, I forget who wrote it, but it's ESPN. But the major point,
Stotts.
I don't know.
Stotts.
But the major takeaway was that kids shouldn't be dedicating all of their time to one sport. And that runs contrary to sort of the Malcolm Gladwellian approach to becoming an elite athlete and mastering your craft. So there's a really delicate balance where it's like, okay, you should be playing all the time. And if you just focus on basketball and you put in your 10,000 hours, you will be a better basketball player than other people because you have mastered your
Fun book,
your skill set.
dumb book. Yeah, debunked right away. But interesting, right?
But the argument that this article makes is that no, you should be playing volleyball and you should be doing soccer or swimming and
Or
doing
nothing.
or nothing, but doing other sports if you want to maintain your, staying athletic and exercising. You should not be playing basketball year round all the time, which is the exact opposite of what you always think about
What boomers
athletes
might
who
think.
are,
Right.
especially but about athletes have always been like, make that decision. Are you a football player? Or are you a basketball player? Are you a baseball player? Or are you this? And like, you got to pick.
Yeah, and I think a lot that, like we talk about this all the time, like advanced metrics aren't necessarily about observing something on the court. It's about like preservation and how to create value. And I think a lot of injury guys who study all these trends are just like, you shouldn't be practicing. You shouldn't be jumping. And now that we have VR, my whole obsession is like, just play 5-on-5 in VR, like how they train pilots virtually, And I think these players are playing too much. And the whole warrior aspect of like an athlete is phasing out. We're seeing it Sinbin in football, where these running backs are like, we're done with this. Pay us the money or we're going to sit an entire season. And basketball is heading to that direction where LeBron James is probably like, my groin was fine, but we couldn't win this year.
Yeah, the irony of course is that
My groin.
the boomer take on all this is that the modern athlete is soft. And it's like, well, no, you're soft.
Yeah, right.
You guys weren't as big or strong or fast. You were bad at the sport.
Yeah.
And that was why you were able to play 48 minutes a game and run around, because it wasn't physical and it didn't put certain types of stressors on your joints.
Yeah.
It's because you guys were just moseying around on the court, shooting up mid-range jumpers and then jogging back on defense. And now guys are playing the full, 94 feet of the court at
Running into screens, like trying to work over like two defenders.
and big guys are consistently being drawn to the perimeter and forced to try to guard guys who are water bugs while
Yeah.
they're lumbering dinosaurs. Like Mark Eaton didn't have to do that shit.
Greg Ostertag didn't have to defend the arc.
Ostertag was never ISO'd on a point guard.
But it's interesting, and like
Big country.
this is I think my brain is like, I'm just obsessed with injury lately, and like the value of these players. Like the more I sit with it, the more I think like Brooklyn made an error. I think watching all these teams sign these superstars for 2 years, we won't see Kevin Durant at 80-90% for 2 years. I think they blew it. But that's hindsight, and I'm jealous, and I wish the Knicks had him, whatever. But this article is really interesting because it kind of like confirmed what my fears were, is that like Iverson was right. Iverson was like, practice? We're talking about practice? And the irony is he was a hard worker in practice. Like he's the one who practiced the hardest, who loved it. But I think we're going to get to a place where it's just like, if there's agency in the league, I think these players are going to be like, you're overworking us. Like, burnout's a new thing. Like, there was that article a few weeks ago. Like, it's a deeply millennial idea, this idea of burnout, which is like pretty anti-boomer, right? It's like, what's wrong with you? It's like, I am just like very tired mentally and physically. Like, what if, it makes me think of Carmelo Anthony. He is like maybe the last vestige of a boomer. And there was that thing that went viral that Chauncey Billups said. It's like the problem with Carmelo is he cared about 30 points too much. He just wanted to score 30 points. So if the team won and he didn't score 30, he was mad. If the team lost and he scored 30, he'd be like, I did my job. And that's like a deeply like cultural, societal kind of idea that we put on this like amazing basketball player from Syracuse.
And they were teammates on the Denver Nuggets.
And that's what, yeah, you know,
I'm just
he
saying
checks out.
It doesn't. It's not just an analyst running his mouth. They literally played together.
And he's right. And like, it makes me think, what if we stopped thinking about work as work and we started thinking about like care as work? And like, what if these players, I think these teams should hire therapists that should just travel with the team everywhere they go. Because Carmelo's whole damage is mental. He could still play. Like, he could have helped the Rockets or the Lakers, but he's stuck, and that's what Billups kind of said. So we're seeing this like reframing of the way we look at these athletes, and this article definitely is pushing in that direction.
There's been a lot of ink spilt about how the league has changed in a way where players may have too much control. Mark Stein wrote in the New York Times an article that wasn't exactly the inmates are running the asylum, but it was hedging in that direction, that Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Kawhi are exercising a degree of control over the league and forming it to their whims in a way that is, to some, unappealing. And obviously this is a boomer stance. Of course. But here's the question to you, Kuo. If you were a fan of a team and
New York.
Right, and I'm saying and a player is viewed and you're only getting stars for like a couple years at a time. Does that bother you as a fan? Are you someone who wants to experience basketball with a static team?
It takes some effort, right? Because I was thinking about, like, what if the Knicks had traded their assets for Russell Westbrook? Or what if we did get KD and Kyrie for a 2-year window? And what if we won? How would I feel about that championship? Probably amazing, but I do like the idea of drafting these kids and being like, we're going to see RJ Barrett for 4 years. Good or bad, whatever. He's going to feel like ours. But slowly, as we look at these things happen in the NBA, I'm losing that emotion of just being like, oh, there is no ours. You know, like, we kind of root for the team, but we kind of just root for the league at this point. Like, it's the game. It's like the whole card table. Looking at, like, the World Series of poker. Like, I'm not rooting for a poker player. I'm just looking at everyone backstab each other. And that's the joy of the NBA now. And, like, it's modern and it's new. And, you know, like, we're done with the Ewing era. That's fine. Let's go. Let's move on.
It's remarkable when you look back and see how long those contracts were before they started stipulating that they could only be 4 to 5 years.
Allen Houston signed a 7-year deal, right?
I mean, it wasn't Kevin Garnett's deal like 11 years? Glenn Robinson, I feel like, signed for like a dozen years or something as a rookie. And they would just go on indefinitely.
Yeah. And we didn't really bat an eye. We were just like, you know, like, KG deserves it. Congratulations. You got job stability. And it makes me think about what we're in 10 years if we're lucky enough to look back and be like, oh, we had it all wrong in 2019.
It's also an interesting approach if you're a player, you know, to say, I'll take a 10-year deal because I'll get the most money. If I get hurt, I'm taken care of. What if I blow out my knee next year? I'll get paid for the next 8 years after that. Like, it is good. And you can compare that to now, where Kawhi Leonard wanted a 2-year deal or 3-year deal with 2 years and then an opt-out. And you know the Clippers like, no, we'll give you 4. Like, please, sign a 4-year deal. And he's like, nah, I'm out of here in 2.
What it do, baby?
we talked about him being a villain.
Fantastic. The Grim Reaper.
Destroyed the Spurs, destroyed the Heatles, destroyed
OKC.
Destroyed
LA. Lakers.
The Lakers, destroyed Golden State, destroyed Toronto.
Yes.
And now he's with the Clippers, and they're like, this guy who keeps destroying teams, we'll sign him, but he'll be cool, right?
He's like, no, I destroy teams.
Like it's you're our guy, right? You're not a remorseless destroyer of franchises. You're going to be here for a while, right? And he's like, 2 years.
Yeah.
And you've just traded away your entire future. But maybe we'll win a chip for you. And you're like, this deal's fine, but do I have slight buyer's remorse? Maybe.
Like, would we be surprised if there was a scenario where he's like, my calf feels funny. I'm going to sit. And you're like, what? We only have you for 2 years. He's like, yeah, I'm going to sit. It's amazing. He's done it before.
I mean, I feel like from all we've heard, his rest is very important to him because it plays a large role in his contracts.
Yeah.
And
he's so smart.
So, like, next season, when he's going to opt out and be a free agent again, he might be like, not feeling this, man. Like, my thigh is a little chafy. I might have to sit for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'll be back around the playoffs, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe not, though. I might just not join the team.
Yeah. And that's as equal of a possibility as him just like Toronto, he gunned it. Like, shout out to Toronto. Like, he left it all out on the court. But like,
he wanted it more.
He just wanted it more. He was the first one to the finals and the last to leave.
That's true.
But he was awesome, right? And he didn't show any of the traits that he showed in San Antonio, which was just like, nah.
But so what are the factors here that are running together? One, you have players being more adamant about their own happiness and saying, you know what, I don't want to be in Boston. I'm Kyrie. Don't really like these dudes that much. Don't really love living in Boston.
Jimmy Butler.
I'm out of here.
I don't want to win a championship. I want to go to the beach. I'm like, do you, man?
But that would have been a very strange decision a few years back.
Yes.
Like, wait, you left a team that was one dinky bounce away from beating the eventual champions in 6 games while Joel Embiid had the proverbial shits. And you're like, yeah, I'm out. I'm just going to go to Miami, play some dominoes and wear hats.
Sounds great.
Like, maybe I'll, eat some seafood and Joe's. Maybe
Delicious. There's a shortage there.
Go to the Standard Hotel. They got those nice little cabanas. Just hang out.
Cuban sandwich.
Yeah, go to Versailles. Have some nice deep fried Cuban foodstuffs. But he opted for that, and like, okay, that's cool. Do you? And so you've got this players having more reasons to do things. Like, it's not really money. It might be winning. It might be lifestyle, which I'm all in favor of this. But we now have that combining with players having more actual say and taking shorter contracts in the way that Kawhi is. This is, in some ways, something that the league will probably want to address. If you are an owner, this is an infuriating set of circumstances. Sometimes it might benefit you, but overall, you are not liking the landscape. You're looking at the horizon, and it's like players deciding where they want to go for whatever reason, playing with each other or not, no matter what you orchestrate, and having the ability to do so. That's worrisome.
It is worrisome, and they just have to adapt, right? I'm really into this idea. It's like, there's no stopping this because players are just going to get better. They're going to make more money. Shoes is a big deal. Like, they see diversity in their revenue. Even with tech, I believe Durant went to Golden State because he was interested in tech. A little bit of that. Carmelo Anthony certainly was interested in investments in New York.
Yeah, Kevin Durant was interested in phones and apps and Twitter and social media.
multiple voices on Twitter.
He's very multi-platform.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's no stopping this. And I think football has also followed suit, no sin bin. But I think the age of empowerment has changed the way we look at this sport. Where, like, I hate to mention fantasy sports, but that's a big deal, gambling, and people being like, "Well, I like the player, so now I'm going to be a Houston Rockets fan because Russ is my guy." That's interesting, right? Like, I think that's a more fluid way to be a fan. So I always think of, like, when I was growing up, I had allegiances to record labels, like Bad Boy versus Death Row. Like, I'm a bad boy dude. I'm a New Yorker. I don't even like Tupac,
I thought you were more of a Fondlum Records. New Arsonists?
What? Doubles, please.
Ruckus only for me.
Yeah, but that's all gone, right? Like, now you hear songs and you don't even know what label they're on. They just show up in your, and that's the tricky thing because Apple has kind of made you forget, but kind of cornered that market. Someone smart is going to come through, and it might be Clutch, and kind of regulate how this player empowerment is shaping to be, because the union's strong. LeBron is a good enough player where he can set a tone, and then Kawhi Leonard wins. So people respect win. If Kawhi Leonard hadn't won in Toronto, we'd view him differently. But he's the same guy.
I think you're making an interesting point about the record label comparison to something like Clutch, and that might be why there's such hostility towards LeBron's machinations from other owners and from the media and from the public, is that Clutch in some ways is a phantom record label where you're like, wait, you don't have allegiance to our team, or you have multiple allegiances. Who are you answering to? The owner of our team and our GM, or are you answering to Rich Paul? Like, who's calling the shots here? And to me, without question, that's one of the reasons that there was such fury from the Pelicans. It's like, am I dealing with the Lakers or am I dealing with Chris Paul? Anthony Davis is on our team.
Rich Paul, yeah.
But he's also, sorry. Yeah. But Anthony Davis is on our team, but he's also under this other, pirate Jolly Roger.
Yeah.
And they're taking other guys and they're riding on team planes and they're stealing clients from, other agencies.
This thought just came into my head, but
they're saying if you don't want to see your agent dancing on stage with you and in your videos,
right,
come to Clutch.
Yeah. It's so interesting you mentioned that, and I haven't thought about it until you started talking about it, of this kind of like underlying kind of allegiance to Clutch beyond the process of the NBA and general managers. And in the 90s, it was religion, right? Like, a lot of these guys like found each other because like they were Christians. And there was an article in the New York Times famously written about the Knicks. And the Knicks may operate on this principle still, but they're not in the league, so it doesn't matter.
If only Charlie Ward was still in the league talking about Jews killed Jesus.
But like,
tough quote.
But it's something we didn't talk about in the 90s, but that's how a lot of these teams operated. Like, are you a good locker room guy? It was code. And we see less of that now. I think, religion has changed through like in 30 years in America and all that. And I don't think a lot of these players now have that kind of obligation. But
is team culture just a euphemism for religion?
It has always been, right? I mean, sometimes, obviously, there's exceptions.
We want guys who are spiritual. We want dudes who are in touch with, like, I don't know, a higher power that they know what their auras are. We want all guys with, like, red and orange auras around them.
Well, it was the whole Phil Jackson quote about, like, the posse thing. Like, he's still in that zone where it's just like, no, like, we're good people and we follow the rules of what we think good people do, which is like no partying, no loud rap music, good neighbors to our players in the next locker room stall, And I think it's interesting to see the changing in a vacuum in the NBA of all these players, because their allegiance, the fraternity seems very tight still. Like, these guys all seem like they're friendly, but they're all just looking around being like, oh, we have a community, and then the NBA is over there, and then the Knicks are really far off in the distance. But like,
they're in the relegated section. It's it's not really like a VIP. It's more of a general audience.
It's a special zone where there's nothing sharp there. You can't hurt yourself, stab yourself by accident. But yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's interesting because you see the evolution of something like unions, which was like a big boomer thing. Like the baby boomers created this idea of unions, and
Then they got really mad at unions,
then
dissolved them along with healthcare.
what the unions turned into their own corporations with like a hierarchy, like the ones that they were trying to get rid of with power and corruption and whatever. But you see the NBA, and they have a very strong union. But then you see these subcultures of it being like, are you Nike or Reebok? Like my friend just went to the Puma Las Vegas event, and all those young players were together, and I'm like, oh, this is a clique. This is almost like a rap group over here. Your boy Zaire Smith was there wearing a wild outfit.
Yeah, he looked like he had just come out of a sauna.
It was strong. I definitely.
He's wearing Puma slides.
Yeah. And like clam diggers.
And then like a striped shirt that was vaguely like Gallic.
Yeah.
Sort of a cliched Frenchman's striped shirt, if I remember correctly.
I'm here for it. It's awesome. What's Russ's fashion going to be like in Houston? Is he going to make some statements on the runway?
They say that the tunnel is the new runway. I mean, you've got some drip kings over there.
Oh my God, PJ Tucker, Westbrook, like is that the drippiest
Harden.
team? And drippiest team in the NBA. Quick.
I think they're the drippiest.
Sixers though. No, yeah, Houston's drippier.
For sure. I mean,
Yeah.
the Sixers aren't particularly like drip worthy. Like you're not seeing them like Instagramming their shoes constantly.
We're so old. I know. I mean, PJ Tucker is my favorite. Let's check out what he's doing pre-game.
PJ Tucker is awesome.
He's amazing. But anyway, back to this thing. Like, it's. I really want there to be like in 10 years like an oral history of like this summer, which is like a wild summer, and being like, oh yeah, it was sneaker contracts and like our good buddies here, good buddies there. We're just trying to set ourselves up for the future. We didn't care about the NBA or your fans.
But I think that's why we're seeing this the fomentation of rebellion from the fan, especially the older one, is that we can see all this tumultuous activity. People changing teams and trading and disbanding and joining up, et cetera, and say, this is fun, this is exciting. We have a new team created out of thin air that we can now analyze and watch, and then it won't be there, and it'll reappear somewhere else. And it's these little constellations that are ever changing, and it's just an interesting thing to talk about. It's so, everything is so malleable and at the same time, I think what's irking people is that we are seeing a total separation of athletes from the team. And that's what all these things we're talking about. Allegiance to agency, allegiance to friends, allegiance to wanting to live somewhere, allegiance to winning, allegiance to teammates, all these things.
Legacy.
It has nothing to do with your jersey or the city. And I think that's what's beginning to really rub people the wrong way.
You've taken the fan out of the equation.
It's like, I care about this team. I go there. I watch, the Brooklyn Nets play. I'm a Nets guy. I want to watch these dudes. I've been rooting hard for you. And you're like, yeah, I'm out of here, man.
Yeah.
I want to go play with my friend.
Yeah.
And, I want to get a bigger sneaker deal and whatever. I'm out. And
Yeah.
you're like, but dude, I've been here rooting for you. I'm wearing your jersey. I thought you cared about this team in the same way I did. You were wearing it. You were celebrating when you won. We were celebrating. You were wearing the jersey. It said Brooklyn right on your chest.
And this is happening IRL in real time in Toronto because they're going to retire Kawhi Leonard's jersey after 1 year of service. And all the fans there are like, he did win us a championship. I'm like, oh, 1 year. It's great. I love this. But like, I've trained myself to like this. Like, these are all mercenaries, and like we're redrafting fantasy teams every year. It's like, oh, next year I really like Harden because I've never had Harden before. But now it's just like the Knicks might have Harden.
And while you have the straight up boomers being like, I don't like this shit, it is a little bittersweet even for more enlightened fans who understand that you want players to have agency and decide where they want to go and for what reasons. But you also, at the same time, are like, yeah, I kind of want my guys, though.
Yeah.
I don't really want Jimmy Butler just to leave.
Yeah.
Like, that was a good team. Those three guys together could have won a title, and Jimmy's like, I'm out. And you're like,
Yeah, that was a little melancholy. But
yeah.
shout out to Jimmy
I'm
Butler.
not even, as I said, I'm an adult here, man. It's cool.
I'm a grown-ass man.
Jimmy's not God. He's not my father. He's not my boss. It's cool. It's 100% cool. At the same time, it's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
That was a squad. Those three guys together, that could have been something really special. That could have been a team that won a chip. And it just will never have an opportunity because Jimmy's like, yeah, I want to eat some, plantains.
Yum. Some carb-on-carb action. But
Go off.
We have a lot of friends down in the 305, and they still talk about the Heatles being like, that was really fun, and we haven't had fun since.
Miami Heat fans talk like the Heatles are still there.
Yeah, totally, man.
Or it is kind of what you said, but it's still such a part of their identity. That was 5-6 years ago, and they're like, yeah, I remember when Brown would come through and you would have the club on Smash, and I remember Bosch would be out there, and you're just like, oh, you're still living in white hot days down there.
They're like, okay, Whiteside is our Bosch, Dion Waiters is our Wade, Dragic is our LeBron. We got this. I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, we have to retrain ourselves as fans constantly, and that's frustrating and hard sometimes. And I mean, it's been very challenging being a New York Knicks fan, having a team in the NBA and not having a team in the NBA anymore.
But here's a question for you, Knicks fan. Would you say that you are now significantly closer to rejoining the NBA with the addition of one of the Morai?
Woo! Which Morai are we talking about? Will we ever know? Is there any way to tell?
I actually don't know which one it is.
I don't know either, but I hope it's the good one. Which one's better? I don't know. We'll never know. We'll never know.
No one knows.
No one knows. A Morai comes into your life on its own terms.
That's a Morai. When you can't tell the twin, but you pay him $15 million, that's a Morai. Yeah, I don't know which one they signed. Does it matter?
No, because they're the same, and hopefully they're going to be traded at some point. 15 is a lot, though.
So we talked about the Knicks malfunctions last week.
Always fun.
I feel like some of the Knicks fans are now, as usual, as fans are apt to do, are now talking themselves into these moves a bit.
Acceptance.
It's acceptance. And I remember when Philadelphia made a lot of decisions to bring in veterans on short-term contracts. The general perception from the punditry and fans was this made sense. It's a sensible, low-risk approach to team building. And you get your Gerald Henderson and your Sergio Rodriguez and your Jared Bayless, and that's okay. And you bring these guys in, and Amir Johnson, and then Redick, and you can. This will work. You'll become a little bit better. They'll teach people. They won't stand in the way. They won't have a financial commitment, and it's junk. It's absolute junk. You end up with a roster that looked like the Sixers last year. That was
They are who they are.
Devoid of talent. That was completely barren, and that you had dedicated all these minutes to mediocre guys who then someone else decided to pay, like Redick, and they just bounce.
Culture doesn't exist.
And I'm telling Knicks fans, as someone who watched this happen, you will not get anything out of this experience.
No, I know.
It sucks.
So, ideally, the Knicks would be carving up that steak. We want to take bad contracts with picks. We want to accumulate 9 draft picks, maybe 6 first-rounders in the next 6 years. Let's do this. The knife is too sharp. They're going to cut themselves. They get a bread knife. They'll be like, you kept your pick. Woo! Okay, RJ Barrett. Okay, you got this. Spread the butter carefully.
I'm just handing the Knicks a spatula.
Yeah.
Okay, be careful with this thing. Just immediately wedging it in their eye and popping their eyeball out.
Totally. We got to give them soft spoons, or soft bowls, so when they drop them, they don't shatter. And at least
Steve Mills safety scissors.
yeah, pretty much. We got to safety pin their mittens onto their coat. So like they're gonna make mistakes like dumb teams do, and they did. Like these signings are bad. There's no way to frame them as beneficial to anything. If they can trick a team into giving a second round pick for like Amorai, cool, but you should have just done that anyway.
Right.
You don't
and
need to hold them.
This is the way that Knicks fans are talking themselves into these moves, where they're saying, well, these guys are on short contracts, and at the deadline, we can move them. And you're like,
They should
okay.
have just done it.
Okay,
Don't sign them.
Maybe you can do that.
Yeah.
But it's like, but what you've created is less upside than if you had just sold off the cap space right now. Like, okay, we've got a Morris on a $15 million 1-year deal. At the deadline, he's a guy who could conceivably help a team. But what's the upshot? Maybe a late round first. Maybe. Most likely not.
No.
But maybe. But the Memphis Grizzlies spent the same amount of money and got 2 first-round picks.
Too smart.
And Iguodala.
They have steak knives, man. The Knicks cannot handle that responsibility.
And the Knicks overpaid these guys because they're in relegation. In order to get a professional player to come and exit the NBA and to spend time in your godforsaken franchise, you have to pay him more than anybody else.
And it's the ecosystem of bad players chasing money, putting up stats, getting more money.
Which then makes those guys harder to move.
Yeah, the Knicks did something that I want them to do is like do what R.C. Buford does and just like steal his ideas. But they don't need these players. We're not in a situation like Amorai would work better in San Antonio this year than it dies on the vine in New York.
And here's the other part of this that is counterproductive. In order for those guys to have enough value to return something substantial at the deadline,
It's not going to happen.
It's probably not going to happen. But if you want it to happen, if you
what's your plan?
If you hope
Tell me
that
what
will
your plan
happen,
is. Right.
you then have to play them. And then they have to play well. So,
And then fucking Mitchell Robinson sitting there.
but you've also created a situation now where you are rewarding winning and meritocracy and guys who play well in order to try to trade them at the deadline ahead of guys that would be worse and help you lose games, but also are a part of your program long term. So you've inadvertently created a situation that incentivizes playing guys who are bad and older and aren't going to be there long term in order to try to get something for them. So you can either say, we're just not going to play these dudes. We're going to cut them loose and play our young guys and be terrible and get a better draft pick. Or you try to do this weird thing where you split the difference where you're like, you add 10 wins, you trade one of those guys for like a couple second rounders, and then you have less lottery balls.
You're making a big mistake here. You think the Knicks are in the NBA. You're talking as if they were in the NBA.
I know they're not in the NBA. They're absolutely not. They think they're in the NBA.
Well, right. Like, Nicole Kidman doesn't know she's the ghost. But, like... but you're speaking as if, like, they have people in their front office being like, oh, what's OKC doing? We could have done that. You know, like, there's no one there that has proven. Maybe Perry has been like, hey, hello, dudes. You know, maybe we can do this.
It's not that I think the Knicks are stupid.
Oh, of course we do.
I'm saying this in a nice way.
Go on.
It's not that I think they're stupid per se, or that they're making mistakes in individual moves, which of course they do. But they're operating under a different framework. It's like you've got teams that are made up of scientists. And the Knicks are like, we're doing alchemy over here. And you're like, yeah, but that doesn't work. What you're doing, like, no, trust me, we got this. We're doing alchemy. We're gonna turn some straw into gold. And other people are like, we're just, we're making vitamins and drugs and we're building something over here. But the Knicks are just doing something different that's like a flawed ideology that they are abiding to.
But this is where I come in and say you're wrong.
God damn it. Hate being wrong.
Straw turns into gold for dumb people sometimes. LeBron was born in Akron. The Cavs are one of the dumbest teams in the NBA. But he gifts them a franchise because he just turned water into wine, right? So
Yes.
My favorite and most overplayed cliche is like broken clock is right twice. Because it's so true, right? Like, and Knicks fans, optimistic Knicks fans, are just trying to find where what time that is. Because
Of
it's going to be
course.
right twice.
Look, the Lakers made every possible mistake, except that they drafted a couple guys who ended up having some value. And then they overpaid to get a star who wanted to play with a star who felt like playing there. They did everything wrong, and they came very close, perhaps, depending on what Kawhi's vision really was. They came pretty close to having 3 of the top 10 players in the NBA on their team by virtue of basically doing everything wrong for a decade.
Yeah. And, like, we always joke about, like, destinations. It's like, come for the pastrami. I get you tickets to Hamilton. Oh, reservations at Nobu. Like, let's do this. But it's true, right? So there is a truth to that. Like, Miami has beautiful beaches, and Jimmy Butler's like, ooh, that beach is beautiful. And I can have these delicious plantains.
What's kind of funny is that there had been the perception that people were only going to big markets, and it wasn't true. But they weren't. People weren't going to the Lakers, the Clippers, the Knicks, or the Nets, or the Bulls. The biggest markets in the NBA were completely infertile ground
Paul George Day.
for free agent signing.
Yeah.
Like last year.
Yeah, Paul George.
And all of a sudden this offseason, following perhaps LeBron's lead, as people do, it was like, we're about lifestyle. We're about cities. Like, oh, we're not about winning anymore? Like, hell yeah. We're not about going home. Finally, this is way better.
It's like Toronto, beautiful city. I grew up in LA, man.
Oh, Toronto, the team that I just won the championship with? Not into it.
Yeah. Never had a shot re-signing me.
It's so wild.
Yeah.
Like, we did it. We won a chip. Are you coming back? No.
Yeah.
Why not? What else do you want?
Yeah.
I don't want to be there. I just won you guys a chip. Yeah. Shouldn't we be cool? And Toronto's like, guess we are.
And this is like, and I don't see this happening anytime soon because all these picks are getting traded, but this gives more fuel to the idea that the NBA draft should be a free agency period. Because then you have all these young players being like, but I want to showcase my stuff. Guys, let's go to the Timberwolves. Like, Zion turns to RJ and be like, we're signing with the Timberwolves. Like, that creates, I don't care about parity. I don't think we should try to create parity. I think parity is a self-policing thing. Officer Mitchell, shout out, whoop whoop. But, like, this is the way parity creates the rules, the system that we'll enjoy more. And to have, like, these players squandered on these teams just because of a lottery ball is ridiculous.
For sure. But I do think the NBA, kind of going, I said this earlier, the owners, they are going to be boiling. They are not going to be happy about this offseason. And we could have looked at prior ones and said, well, people didn't go to these big markets. But this offseason is going to really irritate some teams where it's like,
who touched my grill? Someone
I
took
mean,
my apron.
People are going to be mad. Owners are going to say, wait a minute. So 2 guys went to the Nets, 2 guys went to the Lakers, LeBron and AD, 2 guys went to the Clippers. The Knicks signed a bunch of bad power forwards that no one wanted, but they're not even in the NBA.
Not in the NBA. Miami is building something.
Miami
right now.
signed another guy. And you're like, wait a minute. All the big name talent. And Kemba went to Boston. So it was an
and your
exodus.
boys, Philly came up.
And got Horford. But it was an exodus of players from smaller markets to New York, LA, Philly, Boston. And that is not going to sit well with, say, the Milwaukee owner, who's looking at his calendar and counting out the days until Giannis is a free agent.
Right, and we're already talking about that.
And that guy is concerned.
Yes. In 2 years, that free agent class is insane.
Knicks, baby.
3 rings in a row.
Move RJ Barrett, and you can use him as a sweetener to get rid of that Randall deal.
But, I mean, everyone's signing these 2-year deals, and, like, I think, and this is a wild take, jealousy. Accuse me of anything because you're right. But the Nets maybe have buyer's remorse now because they're not relevant in the league for 2 years, and all these contracts are for 2 years. So, like, they're on hold, which is a weird. D'Angelo Russell was a very good player on the Nets. Kyrie Irving is so much better than D'Angelo Russell. But they're the same team they were last year, kind of.
I think look, they were, I forget what they ended up as, a 6 seed, I think.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah, they played Philly in the first round, so they were the 6th seed. With Kyrie and maybe a weakened conference and some experience from young guys also, like Kuruks or Levert being healthy, they could be a 4 seed.
They're really good.
I'm saying they could win 50 games, and I don't think they're a threat to come out of the East at all, but with an upgrade in Kyrie plus developmental talent on the right side of the curve, 50-win team, and then you add Durant, I think they're going to be comfortable with where they're at.
But people talk about them in terms of they swept free agency at the time before all this stuff happened, being like they got the 2 guys. And I'm like, I say this all the time, the minute that Achilles snapped, everything changed. You don't really value him the same way anymore.
No, and I don't want
Which is
to
sad.
discuss what he's going to be when he comes back because that's a long way off, and it's just a bummer.
It's the worst.
Whether he was actually going to go to the Knicks and then ended up going to Brooklyn,
It doesn't matter.
I would guess that he was going to make the same decision either way.
Yeah, let's just assume that.
I would assume that he was not going to go to the Knicks if healthy, but was down for the Nets with a blown-out Achilles.
He loves 90s rap.
He wanted to go to Brooklyn. He pals around with Charles Oakley, who poisoned his mind with anti-Knicks boomerisms.
Oakley.
But the Durant thing, it just sucks. It just sucks that we saw one of the greatest players of all time
In his prime
go down, and it did disrupt the fact that if a healthy Durant with Kyrie in Brooklyn would be so exciting.
Electric, especially with them retaining all their good young players.
An absolute coup, and as you said, now it's what if we had gotten Jimmy Butler instead?
Better team, and they're on hold, they're on pause, they're not a part of this conversation, and it's sad. And now that we see all this player movement, I think they're like, oh, we could have gotten a healthy player, because.
But there was that weird report that he announced he was going to Brooklyn before they'd even spoken to him.
Yeah, which is amazing. Right?
No.
Yeah,
we're signing Al Horford.
I want to know what happened there, because Joseph Tsai has 49% right now, and I don't know how much Prokhorov is involved. And Sean Marks obviously is there, but he works for these guys. I wonder if Joseph Tsai was just can we get a healthy dude? I don't run Alibaba because I hire compromised employees. I'm not trying to take down Amazon with someone with an Achilles injury, but I don't know. I look at it was exciting at the time, but you drove that Porsche off the lot.
Yeah, I'm excited for them in 2 years. Actually, I think they're going to be good. Kuruks is the truth. Musa, awesome.
He does not look great in summer league.
No, he hasn't been that great. I think he had one good game.
Jared Allen, what did we?
Why is he in summer league?
Why is he in summer league, and why did they get? DeAndre Jordan, we get that, but we're not going to see Jared Allen. So this is kind of where I was going with the Cameron Russ thing. I'm so grateful Russ went to Houston because we get to see peak Russ. No, I hate the word excuses, but there's no reason to question anything anymore, because on OKC we're he's Presti's very smart. They used him well, but what is he? Is he a stat hunter? Can he win the big game? All these weird boomerisms put onto him. But now he's working with D'Antoni and Morey, and we get to see what Russell Westbrook's potential is. We get to see peak Russ.
And maybe we get to see Chris Paul end up somewhere where he'll have the reins in a way that he was never going to have with James Harden. And look, if you were trying to win a championship, in my mind, Philadelphia would be better having Chris Paul next year than Tobias Harris.
Yeah, you tweeted, you texted me last night, Harris for Paul. That makes him a championship contender.
And yeah, Chris Paul's contract is gnarly.
But
he's
you got to do it.
He is just better. He was better last year than Tobias Harris has been at any point in his life or ever will be. Now, however Chris Paul deteriorates, and Harris perhaps improves a bit, he's 26, 27.
And he takes
I don't
possessions.
think those things are going to intersect next year. Maybe the year after that, or maybe never. But Chris Paul is still better at basketball than Tobias Harris is, and plays a position that the Sixers would actually need. And that's a trade that OKC probably does. I'm sorry. Yeah, OKC almost definitely does that trade.
Maybe. Does the money line up?
Yeah, it's close enough. It's like 38 million to 34 or something, whatever.
I'm so worried about Chris Paul's injury, man. Watching him pull up with that hammy, they had the Warriors. They had the Warriors beat.
I agree. And my thing is that I don't necessarily know that Chris Paul over Tobias Harris makes sense in a grand sense. Mm-hmm. But I do think that the openness and the route to a championship, especially in the Eastern Conference, is such that saying we are going to have the most talent in the NBA this year, I think we'll get a chip out of that, is a gamble that I would probably take. And that's the difference between Tobias Harris and Chris Paul. Is saying we could win, to saying we should win.
I agree, man. That team is nasty if you just swap those two. It's just it's that Timberwolves thing being Wiggins is a problem, get rid of him. It's just trade Tobias Harris for Chris Paul. I'm like, oh yeah, done. You guys are probably going to win a chip.
And it's probably not a great long-term plan. Chris Paul would be harder to move
and it's going to
in later years. He gets
poorly.
paid more money, and Harris does not have a ballooning contract in that way that ends up making $45 million. But is the goal here to win a championship, or is the goal to have a crack at the championship in 3 years?
Right. Well, that's the question with everything. Do you want sustainability, or do you want to cash out? It's
Cookies,
It's life.
cash out.
It's life, Ben.
All right.
That
was pretty good. It's pretty good. Good work.
Was it the perfect pod?
It can't be the perfect pod because Jordan is tanning somewhere, turning a golden bronze on the beach. Tropical breezes wafting through his silvery hairs. Can't wait to see you, Jardo.
Miss you.
Cookies.
Cookies.